Just a few days ago, I had a controversial discussion with my wife. And as we were exchanging arguments and it didn't really converge, some great idea came to mind. And I thought, when I bring this point, it has to convince her. Because that just makes so much sense. So I made my point and waited what she would respond. But instead of agreeing, she challenged my argument. And then, when I wanted to respond, something strange happened. I couldn't find any ground, any justification for the argument I just made seconds before. What happened? I just used something that I read on Twitter a few days before. When I read that, it made complete sense to me. And somehow I took it and I kept it and I used it in the argument with my wife. But I never really tried to understand if that really makes sense to me and if I really stand fully behind it. I guess the truth is, I used an opinion that wasn't really mine. So the question for you, and the topic of this video today is, did you ever ask yourself how much of your version of the truth is actually yours? And how much did you adopt from somewhere else? We usually like to think about ourselves as educated and informed and open-minded. And because we are like that, we think our opinions are the result of our thinking, of a process that we went through. But a lot of times, and especially today with our social media behavior, our opinions are the result of exposure. The problem is that we like to believe that our social media feeds, our Instagram and our YouTube and our Twitter, are informing us with a wide variety of different opinions. But that's not really the case. The algorithm doesn't provide what we need. It provides what keeps us engaged. And by that, it slightly manipulates us. And the main issue is, it doesn't even feel like manipulation. When people talk about the problems of social media, they usually talk about the time that they lose and the dopamine addiction. But there is another problem that is hardly discussed. The identity shift that social media causes. Now, if you're in discussion with another person, like I was with my wife, we usually notice when we're getting manipulated. Or when an overambitious salesperson trying to sell you something just for his own profit. But social media does it differently. It gives us exactly what we want. And even more of it. We could name now this behavior manipulation by seduction. And that's actually a very old and also well-known pattern. Carl Jung says that's even something that's inherently in all humans. He says we have a lot of these patterns, and he calls them archetypes, and they're a part of what he calls the collective unconsciousness. The one archetype that fits to this behavior is the trickster. And we all know the trickster from our lives and our favorite stories. The trickster is morally ambitious. It doesn't care about good or evil. He's usually just opportunistic. He works through your own reflection, not by force, but by giving you what you want. The trickster actually acts like a mirror. It's showing you your own reflection. It's showing you different versions of yourself. It could be your ideal self, or your past self, or even a version of yourself that has flaws. But he uses these reflections in a way that is useful for him. A classical example of the trickster would be Hermes from the Greek mythology. Or if you prefer a more modern version, the Joker in The Dark Knight. The Joker is not necessarily evil. He's trying to force the people to put down their mask, and he does this by creating disorder and chaos. Now, based on how it works, we could say the algorithm is also a modern version of the trickster, a technological version. And when I say that, I don't mean this metaphorically, because the algorithm has exactly the traits of the trickster. It's not showing you something new. It's showing you what you want to see. It's also very opportunistic, right? It doesn't care about good or evil. It just cares what keeps you engaged and what keeps you longer attached to the screen. And the companies like Google or Meta or X, they're not even hiding that. They're talking openly about that. Constantly they're collecting your data just to keep you more attached. They're always with you, from the moment you wake up in the morning to check what's new, until you go to bed with the last YouTube video. And if you have one of these modern sleep trackers, then even beyond that. You know what concerns me most about that? That they know you already better than any human being could ever know you. How much information does your best friend have about you? It's even more than that. I think in some cases, they know us already better than we do ourselves. That's exactly what happened to me in this discussion with my wife. Slowly, without noticing, they implanted this thought in my head, and I used it and sold it as my opinion. That was one of the points where I realized I'm not just wasting my time online. These apps are really changing who I am. And if you're now slightly nodding or agreeing to that, that says a lot. So stay with me to see what we can do about that. We change constantly, and also the life and situations change constantly. The goal of our life is to grow. Every living creature strives for growth, or it refuses it when it's dying. This process of growth is what Jung called individuation, becoming who you are. But for this growth to happen, we need friction, we need resistance, we need something to work against. The social media feed is not giving us that. It's giving us easily digestible bites of some entertainment. It's also not really showing us different opinions or viewpoints. And Jung said it clearly, you can't individuate into a mirror. Let's do a short thought experiment. Think about a time in your work, in your career, where you had some problems. Maybe with a lazy colleague or a boss that didn't acknowledge your efforts and your skills. Or maybe a promotion that you have deserved, but somebody else got it. So what are we usually doing in such situations? Today. Right, we're going to LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, we find everything that confirms that we are right. We find other professionals in similar situations. We find posts about toxic work culture, or people talking about generational conflicts at work. And it's all valid, that's nothing extreme. But by constantly being exposed to that, after a while, after weeks or months, we adopt this opinion. And now instead of facing the situation at work, we just stick to our position. Because we are right, and therefore the others must be wrong. The algorithm didn't radicalize us, but it elaborates us. Elaboration is not growth. Elaboration is a quantitative intensification of what already exists. Growth is the opposite. Growth means something qualitative has to change. I also catch myself sometimes having the same pattern, the same behavior. I think if I'm consuming more, I understand more. But in reality, I just become more entrenched. So how can we improve our relationship with social media? Most of the people and experts would suggest something behavioral. Delete your apps, limit your screen time, do a social media detox. The problem with this is that only treats your symptoms. It doesn't go to the root of the problem. The real solution must be a psychological one. Jung was also very clear about that. Archetypes, so also the trickster, they cannot be eliminated. You can't kill them or eradicate them or delete them from your life. You can only become aware of them. But that recognition changes everything. So ultimately, the solution is to beat the trickster with its own weapons. To catch him in situations where he's applying this manipulation, this seductive behavior. The goal must be to notice your own reactions while you're consuming content. And to do that in a systematic way, I have here 3 questions that you can think about whenever you think something is not going in the right direction. The first question is, when was the last time you encountered something that really changed your mind? I mean something that you really took and stayed with it. Something where you said, okay, I was probably wrong and that makes more sense. Second question, is there anyone you follow whose worldview is drastically different from your own? And would it be worth engaging more with such people? Not to adopt or confirm their opinion, just to reflect and admit that their view might be also valid. And the last question is, what was the last strong opinion you shared publicly? And where did it come from? What need were you serving when you engaged with it for the first time? I put the questions in the description that you can access them easily and come back to them whenever it makes sense. Keep in mind, you can't fight archetypes or archetypal forces, but you can make them work for you. Now, if you want to continue your growth path and not just to amplify more of what you already are, then individuation is the right way. And individuation is a lifelong process. It doesn't have a finish line or an end point where you say, okay, from here on, I'm perfect now and I never change again. As we said before, we're always changing, and that's also necessary, but let's make sure we're changing in the right directions. Therefore, individuation requires a starting condition. It requires a reality that isn't entirely shaped around you. That doesn't mean now you have to delete all your social media accounts, but sometimes you have to go into this discomfort and change your perspective. But the problem today is that the world we're living in, it pulls you in an opposite direction. It's based on shallow entertainment and confirmation and comfort. The trickster is very clever. It always offers you a slightly more comfortable version of who you already are. That's why this work, individuation, is not optional anymore. We have to walk that path to protect our human essence. And if some of this landed for you, I'll leave you with one final question. Who were you before the algorithm learned what you respond to?